Bahrain is not an easy place to visit in the summer. Desert covers most of the 30 islands that make up the country. In August, it's so hot, humid, and miserable that temperatures regularly exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit. But this remote nation does offer one attraction. It's the perfect place for a troubled man to put distance between himself and his problems, which may explain what it was there. The Persian Gulf that Michael Jackson sought sanctuary after the trial. In August of 2005, Michael turned 47. He had his freedom, but in truth, his problems are far from over. Rather than relish his new independence, Michael has sunk into a deep depression, often suffering from panic attacks and insomnia as if traumatized by the trial. He refused to speak about it. This was not the victory that his friends had fought for. After the verdict, the pop star had all but disappeared from public view. There were no post-trial parties, no triumphant press conferences. In truth, Michael was in no fit state to celebrate. He was too ill. A couple of days after the verdict, he took into a hospital in Santa Barbara to be treated for exhaustion and dehydration. Not long after, he was released. He took off, leaving Neverland, never to return. He went into a total seclusion, a source close to the singer told me. He was depressed, anxious, unable to eat or sleep. He almost lost it all his freedom, his family, his career. You don't just bounce back after something like that, he told me. To this day, I wake up feeling upset and I'm scared to death, and me, it takes me half an hour to remember that it's over. The only person Michael saw in the weeks after the trial, other than his children and their nana, Grace Marumba, were a therapist. For the first time in his life, Jackson decided to seek counseling. It was definitely a step in the right direction. He knew he needed help, and maybe it was an indication of growth that he actually saw it instead of ignoring the signs. He felt totally victimized by Gavin, the rest of the scheming officials, and also the Santa Barbara District Attorney Tom Snedden. One of Michael's inner circle told me he had a difficult time getting past the fury he feels about the whole situation. One day he told me, God forgive me, and don't tell Catherine I ever said this, but I hate that kid. I so hate that kid. Well, I remember he looked at me for a moment and he said, part of me thinks so, that's not right. You shouldn't hate, but then I think I can't help it. I hate that kid for what he did to me. My therapist is telling me that I need to get real with myself and feel what I feel, not suppress what like I usually do. Well, how I feel is that I hate that kid. I do. As described to me, what Jackson has been experiencing something akin to post-traumatic stress syndrome. He had persistent nightmares about the trial, replaying in his head the lurid evidence against him, the many witnesses, the stuff shown to the jury, the look of anguish in his mother's face. It was the worst thing that ever happened to him, and it made him feel raw, if at all possible, even more disconnected. Michael didn't want to talk to anyone who reminded him of what happened in Santa Maria. Even the people who were at his side throughout the trial. His family was out as far as he was concerned. He seemed to want nothing to do with most of them. Some of the Jacksons were talking about a reunion tour again, and this time it must have felt to Michael that if he really owed them the honor, but still, he wasn't going to do it. He felt pressure into becoming involved in other family matters, not to mention his collapsing financial empire, and he simply didn't want to traffic in either world, so he took off. He went to Bahrain, which was about as far away as he could. The rejection hurt his family deeply. Joseph desperately wanted Michael to make an appearance at a birthday party for him in Germany. Michael couldn't bring himself to do it. In the end, Joseph had to hire a Michael Jackson impersonator. Also, Michael knew the royal family in Bahrain, and so he hunkered down with them. Of course, later on, the prince will sue Michael for breach of contract, saying he had to a deal to make records, and Michael reneged. So what else is new? It was Michael's lack of personal responsibility that made me want to have nothing to do with him after the trial. I was able to get past the accusations in my reporting of him. After all, I believed them to be not guilty in our visual mess pretty much from the very beginning. However, I simply couldn't reconcile his total disregard for other people in his life. In my mind, he owed his family something of their loyalty. Perhaps they had pressured him into participating in ventures in which he wasn't interested in the past, but this time I felt he had an obligation to at least try to work with them again. After all, their support must have meant something to him after the trial. There were Jacksons there every single day. Beyond that, I couldn't understand his lack of loyalty to all the people who kept Neverland afloat in his absence during the trial. As soon as the trial was over, practically everyone was let go without servants did, servants pay. Dozens of caretakers, maids, and other functionaries, people with children at home who had given their all to Michael, were just dismissed by him, seemingly without a second thought. There Then there was the onslaught of lawsuits by former attorneys and business associates. one after one after another after the trial. Of course, Jackson had been anything but the consummate businessman for at least the previous 10 years. But now things were out of control. Did he ever pay anyone with whom he had made a deal? Did he ever sign a contract he didn't break? It is so obvious to me that he was not a man of his word, and to be frank, as his biographer and as someone who I know for so long, it just me off. I'm a man of honor, he once told me. It was then I made a joke about his marriage to Lisa Marie Presley on the TV Good Morning America. He called me to chastise me. If you believe anything about me, believe that. Indeed, looking back after on it now, I guess I felt laughed out by Michael Jackson. So for years after the trial, I didn't want to write about him. But you have to be more objective, one editor told me. Yeah, well, I responded. When he starts paying his bills, maybe then I'll start writing about him again. In my view, Michael Jackson had a golden opportunity to reclaim his career after the trial. I couldn't understand why he wanted to blow it in such an epic scale. He kept promising records that never came out, dates that never materialized. He seemed to not have a place to live. He and his children would live with friends in one city and then migrate to another as if they were homeless. I didn't want to know anything about any of it. It all seemed so disappointing and useless to me. Looking back on it now, I wish I had more sympathy for a man so clearly in pain. He never got over the trial. That trauma was still eating away at him. I understand that now. How could he care about anyone else when he was trying to get through the day himself? Anyone thinks he is just going to bounce back after such public humiliation doesn't know Michael Jackson. His former manager, Fred DeLeo, had told me that that June day when he was acquitted, this is devastating for a guy like Michael. This is life ruining, I'm afraid. Indeed, after Santa Maria, little mattered to Michael except for perhaps the only thing that could have mattered his children. His career was in shambles and his finances in ruin, but it was of no consequence as far as he was concerned. He had the love of his three children, the two Prince Michaels and Paris, And as long as that was the case, he figured he'd be fine. Ironically, considering his nomadic existence, one who knows it best like to think that those post Santa Maria years were among his best in the sense of that he had truly refuturized his life. No longer did he care if he was number one or not, and that has certainly been a goal of his for most of his time on this planet. He no longer had the kind of fire in his belly a person needs to do what Michael Jackson had already done with his life and career. For those who wanted to see him back on top, his lack of passion for his career was difficult to accept. But maybe he had given it all he had to give. Maybe after so many decades in the spotlight, it was finally time for us to just leave him alone.